Justifying factors. Using the zip code to justify the rate. Now, it's very important to understand the concept that every zip code may offer a different rate. It doesn't matter if it's borderline from one street to the other, or from one light to the other, or simply from one city to the other. It doesn't really matter. What you have to understand is that every zip code is evaluated differently. Now, let me just share a couple factors. Now, simply it could be based on crime. I mean, vehicles are being stolen, they're being vandalized. That could be a possibility. Accidents, for example, within one intersection or within one zip code, within one block, within one perimeter, there may be more accidents reported within that specific area. Or simply violations. Maybe a lot of speeding tickets, a lot of taking a stop sign, or anything that has to do with violations. Maybe there's a lot of violations reported within that zip code, within that area. So therefore, these areas become more of a higher possibility for someone to be involved in an accident. So therefore, anybody that lives within that area is going to go through that area, is going to drive through those streets, is going to cross those intersections. So therefore, they become more exposed to being involved in an accident. Not necessarily based on their driving record or their situation, is based on statistics on the zip code. So it's very important for you to educate the client that this is one of the reasons. So that's number one. Number one is the exposure on violations, accidents, crime, or just based on statistics. Number two, more of a city, zip code, but connected to a city that has more population. A more populated city is going to have more exposure. So if we compare different cities, for instance, we compare Los Angeles with Riverside, Los Angeles with Bakersfield, Los Angeles with San Diego, Los Angeles with Moreno Valley. Los Angeles is always going to be more expensive because there's more it's a higher populated city versus the rest of the cities. So what does that mean? More population equals more vehicles, more vehicles on the road. And what does that mean? That means there's more exposure and probably more accidents. And matter of fact, this is a formula, and I want you to use this formula every time you're emphasizing on the zip code. Use the formula that the higher population equals more cars on the road, and that equals more exposure and more accidents. So if they fall under one of these cities that obviously has more population, that means there's more vehicles being driven, and ultimately there's more accidents. So you're going to emphasize on the fact that everyone that lives within Los Angeles is going to pay a lot more than any other city or any other driver that lives in a different city. So you're going to go based on population. You're going to go based on the fact that there's more vehicles on the road, there's more exposure to accidents, and therefore the insurance companies are going to charge us a little bit more. So it's not necessarily based on your driving record or your age or anything of that nature or the coverages. In this case, this segment is specifically adding value based on the zip code. Now you're going to compare the situation of, look, if you lived in a different city like Bakersfield, Riverside, you would be paying a lot less. But the fact is, you don't. Similar to me, I live in Los Angeles as well. So I'm actually within the same situation as you. I pay a little bit more simply because we live in Los Angeles. But then again, that's just the cost of living. Anyone that lives in Los Angeles pays a lot more for everything. The cost of living, probably the utilities, all the services, everything is going to be a lot higher than if you live in a different place. For instance, and you could use this as a justifying factor as well, or sorry, you could use this as a real life example, and you could tell them, look, even renting an apartment, a one-bedroom apartment is going to cost you literally at least a good $1,200 to $1,500 in Los Angeles. I could guarantee you, you move to Bakersfield, you move to Moreno Valley, you move at least 100 miles away from Los Angeles, minimum of 100 miles, you're going to be paying $600, $700 for one bedroom. Matter of fact, for $1,200 or $1,500, you could afford a property. You could technically have a mortgage payment for that amount, and not on a one-bedroom house. You could have a 2-3 bedroom house. So the fact that Los Angeles, we pay a lot more for everything, is a justifying factor when you're emphasizing on the zip code. Now, once again, always compare the difference between living in one area, living in one city versus the other, and the fact is that there's more exposure. So make sure to emphasize on that, emphasize on the statistics, emphasize on the formula that I just gave you, which is based on population and the exposure. And number 3, make it realistic. So put them in a real life scenario. Ask them a couple questions, make it relevant to them so that at least you can make it tangible. For instance, you could tell the customer, look, what would you say? Would you agree with me that if you're driving through downtown, through Los Angeles, do you see at least thousands of cars every single day? Have you ever been in the freeway where there's no cars at all? They're going to tell you no. So that's exactly the reason why insurance companies offer a little bit more for anyone that lives in Los Angeles, simply because there's always cars on the road. So that means they're always taking a chance of having to pay for that accident. So once again, justifying factors based on the zip code, use the statistics, the city, and the difference between every city, and obviously the formula of the higher population equals more vehicles on the road, which eventually equals more accidents. And number 3, make it relevant to an actual real life scenario. Use a real life situation, a real life example to convince them that it's not something that insurance companies use because they want to charge us more, because it makes sense, like the cost of living, or just simply the fact that driving in LA, there's more exposure than any other city. So use this. This is a very crucial topic, simply because customers may not understand why they're paying more, why other relatives are paying a lot less. Maybe they live somewhere else. So justifying factors, use the zip code scenario. It adds a lot of value.